Retired California Superior Court Judge Ladoris Hazard Cordell. Judge, thank you so much for joining me tonight. As I was noting, just a few moments ago, we heard from the special counsel. They're responding to the Trump team over this protective order. And part of what they said, and I'm quoting the special counsel's team now, is the defendant has proposed an unreasonable order to facilitate his plan to litigate this case in the media to the detriment of litigating this case in the courtroom. They say normal order should prevail. And of course, this is a point they made repeatedly throughout the filing. What do you make of that response?
Well, it's important to know that a protective order is asked for evidence that's being handed over in discovery. Discovery happens in a criminal case. Prosecutors turn over information to the defense. Not all information in discovery is admissible in court. It might be deemed to be irrelevant or too prejudicial. So what Trump's people want is to take all of this information, no matter what it is, whether or not it is admissible, and put it all out there for the world to see. And the problem with that, of course, is that what that does is inflame the jury. It gets potential jurors, and it gets them to see information that perhaps they would not ever see if they were selected as jurors to be in a trial. I presided over the nearly 20 years I was on the bench over lots of criminal cases. Some of them got media attention, and never once did I ever have a defendant ever take discovery and then go put it all out for everyone to see. It just doesn't happen. So I think it's absolutely appropriate to issue a protective order in this case.
Yeah, it sounds like you think that that's a genuine concern that Jack Smith's team has here.
Absolutely. All of this information just should not be put out. It's up to the judge to decide what information will come into the trial. So to put it all out there, there's only one purpose, and that is to just inflame people and to influence people who might be jurors in the case, which is all inappropriate. The case should be tried in the courtroom with decisions made about what evidence is admissible and what is not.
And I think you just made a really important point, and I want to get to what Trump's team is saying about this, but what you just made is a really important point, that this is a protective order. This is not asking for a gag order, which would mean that he can't basically speak at all publicly about this case. And my understanding is that a protective order is a pretty standard move this early on in a criminal prosecution like this.
Absolutely. This is standard procedure. And so what people are seeing is a playbook for how to delay a criminal case. Just delay, delay, delay. So pick at everything. So this is standard information. And again, the key is we want to have a fair trial for both sides. And the only way to do that is for a judge to determine what is admissible evidence and what is not. And it cannot happen if all of the discovery is then just thrown out by Trump's side and just everyone in the public and the media gets to see it when it may not even be relevant or appropriate in the case.
And here's how Trump's team is arguing. So their deadline was 5 o'clock today. Then we just saw Jack Smith's team respond to what they said. But Trump's team was basically arguing, and I'm quoting from their filing now, they say, in a trial about First Amendment rights, the government seeks to restrict First Amendment rights. Worse, it does so against its administration's primary political opponent during an election season in which the administration, prominent party members, and media allies have campaigned on the indictment and proliferated its false allegations. I mean, how do you think Judge Chutkan will read that argument from the Trump team?
Well, I don't think she's going to give it much merit at all, and I hope she doesn't spend much time on it. An election is not a trial. They're two distinct things. And what they're basically saying is First Amendment. They clearly, his lawyers and Trump, do not understand the meaning of the First Amendment. This has nothing to do with First Amendment. This has everything to do with making sure there is a fair trial. And the only person in charge of doing that, it's not Trump, it is the judge in this case. Her rulings will determine how the trial will proceed, and she will follow all of the rules and therefore ensure that there's going to be a fair trial for both sides.
Depending on how quickly she issues a response, I mean, what will you read into that? Because it's not just what she decides here, it's also the scope of it, but also how quickly she responds. Do you think that will signify, how quickly she plans to move this case along?
Absolutely. It's a very good point. Just as she responded very quickly when they wanted a continuance and she shut that down, I think her response is not going to be, oh, come back to me in 90 days and I'll give you a written decision. I think this judge understands that time is important, and she also knows what kinds of issues are important. This is not a big deal. What the Trump side has said, well, we want kind of a compromise. No, either, in my view, either the protective order gets granted or it does not. My view is she will grant it because it's not an infringement on anyone's First Amendment rights.
When prosecutors were arguing for this first on Friday night, as we were talking about on this show, then they cited a post that Trump had from Friday night, the one that we just read that was in all caps, pretty vague but threatening, saying, mildly threatening, saying, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. I mean, how much does something like that, if you're a judge making this decision, how much does that factor into her call here?
Right. So I don't know necessarily that that quote impacts the protective order, but that certainly would get me thinking, if I were the trial judge, about a gag order in this case. It's clearly a threat. And a good trial judge doesn't just look at the law. You use common sense. And anyone looking at common sense, looking at what he has posted and the timing of when he posted it, raises another issue, whether or not this person and the team should be told, and this is true on both sides, just to say we're going to have a mutual gag order. And I would expect that may come next. And I'm afraid that what after that, if indeed the gag order is issued, which is not a First Amendment issue at all, is basically saying don't talk about this outside of the courtroom. My guess is Trump would violate it in a heartbeat, and then we'll see what the judge does in terms of consequences for violating yet another court order.
So you think there will be a gag order here? At least you think that there should be?
Oh, I absolutely can see it coming because this man cannot shut up. He's a chatty Charlie, and he's going to just talk and talk, and he really doesn't care about rules and about saying the rules that say you can speak or cannot speak. So this is where the test of a good trial judge comes about. If you're going to have a fair trial, it's going to be by the rules set by that person in a black robe. And if the rules are you do not talk about this other than in the court because it's not punishment, it's to ensure a fair trial. If that doesn't happen, there has to be immediate consequence to violating a court order. Only in that way can everyone have respect for the system.
Yeah, well, and we know what the Trump team response would be is that he's a candidate for president, he's running, he has his free speech rights. We'll see what the judge does decide here on the protective order first. Judge, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Judge Cordell.
Sure, my pleasure.
I'm joined now by our panel.